Welcome back to Let the Quran Speak. For the past few weeks, we've been discussing 10 reasons as to why the Quran is divinely revealed. And we're on to our last two reasons now. Now, with Shabir, we've gone through all sorts of things from scientific proofs to mathematical proofs to just plain old sincerity and such things. Now we're down to number 9, and this is speaking of a challenge that has been put out in the Quran to produce a similar book. First off, what exactly is this challenge, and has it even been attempted so far?
Yeah, the challenge seems to be stated in the Quran in a number of places, and basically what is being asked for is for someone to show that the Quran is a human production by producing something like the Quran. Some passages that speak of this speak of producing 10 chapters like the Quran. Some say produce a book like the Quran. Some say produce just one chapter. And it seems that at various times, because the Quran was revealed a piece at a time over a long period of 23 years, at various times the challenge was appropriate to the level of revelation that had already been given. So at one time it might be said, okay, produce a surah like the surahs of the Quran, because now the Quran is known to be composed of some surahs. And by the time the Quranic revelation had reached such a stage that many surahs had been revealed, that is when the challenge comes to be increased to say, okay, this much is what we know about the Quran. So we have a large number of surahs. Okay, you produce 10 surahs like it. And later on in the prophetic career, the Quran comes to be fairly complete. It's now known to be a substantial book. And now it is said to them, okay, produce a book like the Quran to show that it can be done. And it has never been done.
Has it been attempted?
Yes, some attempts are known. There was a poet who was famous in pre-Islamic Arabia, Labid ibn Rabi'a. Once, in response to this challenge, he hung up a little composition of his own in the Kaaba, and that is the house of worship set up there for the worship of the one God in Mecca. And some of the Muslims then brought him some passages of the Quran, and when apparently he was not quite clear on what the Quran actually said. So when he saw these passages, he surrendered immediately. He pulled down his own composition and he embraced Islam. He said that what was being shown to him here must come from a divine source. Apparently the Arabs at the time had so perfected the skill of producing poetry and beautiful moving compositions that they had reached their pinnacle, and when they saw how the Quran had its effect on its listener, they felt that this is not really the work of a human being. It must be a divine book. And Labid embraced Islam, and later on he refused to compose any further poetry. He felt, when he was asked about this, why do you not compose? And he said that once the Quran is here, why should we try to compose anything else? So he was so overwhelmed by the Quranic revelation.
Now, we've covered the challenge. Now, let's go to our last reason. Now, our last reason is the reasonableness of his teachings. Now, of course, many would argue against this, say that it's not reasonable at all, it's extreme and such things. How do we answer to that?
Well, we can say the best answer is to study the Quran itself and not look at misrepresentations about the Quran. There are certain basic teachings in the Quran which are referred to now as the pillars of Islam. And they start with the testimony that there is only one God. And there's nothing unreasonable about that. In fact, it is quite reasonable to say that there is only one God. The testimony that Muhammad is the messenger of God is also quite reasonable in the light of everything we know about the Prophet Muhammad. Even those who are not Muslims but are studying the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, often do not hesitate to refer to him as the Arabian Prophet. They see him as a prophet very similar to the prophets which are mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, but the main difference being that he grew up in Arabia as opposed to the other prophets growing up in the Near East. So it's a little difference between the Near East and the Middle East, or anywhere in the world for that matter. If someone betrays the similar characteristics that are known from the prophets who are mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, why should we say these are prophets and this one is not? We have to be fair and So fair-minded historians generally think of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as a prophet, like the prophets of the Israelite nation. There's nothing unreasonable about that. The first, after the testimony of the faith, the remaining pillars are all quite reasonable. The prayer, for example, is a quite reasonable exercise. It combines the mental and spiritual and physical activity all at once. There is a meditation and there is also physical movement. So one couldn't be a couch potato if he really wants to offer the 5 prayers and be a good Muslim. Mm-hmm. Fasting is an exercise that frees us from the control that our basic physical desires can have on us. The desire for satisfying the basic natural animal urges within a human being. A person who fasts actually gains control over these natural urges, and at the same time he develops sympathy for the poor. So one cannot say this is an unreasonable practice. Third, the charity, in fact, is quite beneficial in that it frees a person from the greed of holding on to the wealth and saying, okay, this is mine, I better keep it. Mm. And it gets a person introduced to the idea of being serviceable to the rest of humankind. And finally, the Hajj, or the pilgrimage, is also a reasonable activity in that it brings the entire Muslim community together from all over the world to give them that sense of unity, of singularity and purpose, and reinforces in them the strength of the faith that they have felt. It is for such reasons that people hold conventions and conferences all over the world for a variety of purposes. And here we have Muslims gathering in a singular world conference of a sort, in which they can build their solidarity and reinforce their sense of who they are. People travel for a variety of purposes. They go and spend a lot of money, and they have a holiday and come back and then face the bills, and they're sorry sometimes that they have gone on the holiday because of the bills they've accumulated. But one who goes on the pilgrimage comes back really happy, satisfied, tranquil, a changed person. One's life is improved for the better, giving up the things which are harmful to self and to society. So again, the Hajj, or the pilgrimage, is quite reasonable practice. So altogether we can see that whether we're looking at these basic practices of Islam or we go even into the rest of the Quranic prescriptions, we will find that they're all reasonable teachings that were given to human beings for the benefit of people, not for God's benefit, because he doesn't gain anything really if we do well. But if we do well, we are the ones who gain, and the Quran was actually given to us as a book of instruction, kind of an owner's manual, so that we know how to live our lives to get the best possible result.
Thank you, Brother Shabir.
Welcome.